We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast of St. Louis on the Air, brought to you by University College at Washington University, with undergraduate and graduate programs part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. It's our final Legal Roundtable discussion of the year, a good time to review the year just ending in the world of law and jurisprudence. I sat down with today's panel a few days ago to look back on 2018. Joining me for the discussion were our regular attorney panelists, Mark Smith and Bill Freivogel of Washington University and SIU Carbondale, that is, and Jennifer Joyce, longtime circuit attorney in the city of St. Louis. Thank you all so much for being with us. Hope you're all having a good holiday season.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'd like to start very generally and just get some sense in looking back over the last year as to what stands out to you and maybe the biggest law-related story. Jennifer, as our guest today, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm gonna take a local perspective on this, and I'm going to say that, in my view, the biggest story of the year was the defeat of Bob McCullough by Wesley Bell in the August primary in St. Louis County. Followed closely by the Governor Greitens' prosecution and ultimate stepping down from his office. But I think the Wesley Bell and Bob McCullough race really encapsulates a dynamic that we're seeing going on around the country, and many people felt that was not going to be the outcome. I think a lot of people were surprised by it, and I think it's very interesting and impactful for the region.
Including Bob McCullough, surprised by it. He was in the studio the other day, and he's not quite gotten over it yet, I don't believe.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, how about you?
Well, so going more on the national stage, I think the confirmation of Kavanaugh, not so much that, the hearings were obviously a further part of the Me Too movement, but I think, what really will be impactful is now the realignment on the Supreme Court. You've got 5 conservative justices, and with a lot more freedom to make changes. Now, there's questions, and there have been some. There was a dissent from Clarence Thomas about not taking the cert petition for the Planned Parenthood case, and people are saying, Kavanaugh is not going to be, I think he's going to be a conservative. I think Roberts wants to be careful, and I think Kavanaugh is probably influenced by that. But I think we'll see some big changes, maybe not this year or next year, but in the next few years.
We'll go into more detail on all of these things. And Bill, finally, your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I would agree with both what Jennifer and Mark have to say, but also, I guess, to me, the very biggest legal story is the Mueller investigation, because I think it definitely threatens President Trump's presidency. It appears as though Mueller is putting together a case of the questions, the legality of Trump's actions when it comes to directing payments to adult industry stars to keep them quiet right before the election, and also possible obstruction of justice by firing Comey and doing a number of other things to impede Mueller's investigation. I mean, we know quite a bit more, and quite a bit has happened since a year ago. We've got the campaign manager, deputy campaign manager, national security advisor, all have either been convicted or pled guilty. I think we didn't have a clue a year ago that Cohen, his personal lawyer and fixer, and big supporter, would flip on him and say the president had instructed him to make the payments to the 2 women, and that the president had been continuing to negotiate or to at least talk about a Moscow Trump Tower into the beginning of the presidential election. In fact, into June, that month when Trump Jr., Kushner, and Manafort met with the Russian operative offering third on Hillary Clinton. So it's sort of all pulling the story together. I think it really is a big threat to the president.
And the latest chapter in that is the fact that Matt Whitaker, the acting attorney general, has just announced that he will not recuse himself in connection with this, which creates the specter hanging over all of this, the sword of Damocles, if you will, that he could pull the plug on Mueller.
Well, let's not forget, though, that Mueller is not directly overseeing it's not overseeing in any way the Michael Cohen investigation, which is arguably the biggest threat to the president right now. That is where he is basically an unindicted co-conspirator, and he is, looking at substantial jail time for that. And the fact that the Eastern District of New York, or the Southern District, of New York, was able to conduct that investigation and that prosecution and release documents laying out the president like that when the president is their boss ultimately is just fascinating to me. I mean, I'd like to know, why did Mueller kick that to the federal prosecutors in Manhattan, and how were they able to do this without being tampered with? It's almost as if Trump had took his eye off that ball and was focused on Mueller, and wasn't paying attention to what the federal prosecutors in New York were doing.
Well, doesn't the pardon issue come into play? Because it's the Trump, as I understand it, maybe I'm wrong on this, could not pardon.
No, he can pardon. Trump can pardon any federal crime.
But if he's okay, all right.
Cohen is looking at federal charges. And so he could pardon that. Will he pardon Cohen? I seriously doubt it at this point.
Not at this point. I don't think.
Since Cohen came in on him big time. But how he didn't tamper with this prosecution, I don't understand. And is there too much? Would it look too bad? Would the optics be too bad if he now had this acting attorney general try and shut down that New York federal prosecution? Would the public, would that be finally the point where the public says, hey, that's enough? I just think it's very, very interesting, obviously unprecedented legal issues here.
I wouldn't be surprised if once we knew the whole story that Mueller sort of wanted to dish out that part of the investigation, so that, because this was a period of time last summer when the president was talking to people about firing Sessions, and so I think it made the overall investigation much more difficult for the president to contain once this major element had been sent off to a U.S. attorney's office, and so getting rid of Mueller wasn't going to get rid of everything that could jeopardize his presidency.
Yeah, and then there's probably no end to the state type of prosecutions. Right. Then he can't pardon anybody for those.
That's what I was thinking of, the state prosecution.
And we had the Supreme Court just heard oral arguments on this case, questioning whether you can double jeopardy attaches to both federal and state. And it sounds like from the arguments that the justices are not buying that they're not going to change the law. And the reason, part of the reason is because there was a lot of discussion. What if some foreign government tries you for terrorism, say, and finds you not guilty? Can the United States still? And there was an early case that would have been, or English precedent, I guess, that it would have barred you. And that, so, if you're an originalist, you would have to accept that as well. And they weren't going in that direction. So I think these are all bad things for Trump.
And we've lost the Trump Foundation as our year-end charitable gift recipient this year. He's been accused of running that as his own checkbook. I mean, it's just one thing after another. My fear is that we're normalizing to this as a country, and we don't realize how truly bizarre it is to have one story after another on the evening news about corruption and things of that nature in the highest office of the land. Yeah. I think he's going to be dogged by this presidency of his for the rest of his life. I think he's going to have litigation and things haunt him forever. Well-deserved, some might say, but it's just unbelievable.
I mean, a year ago he was saying he didn't know anything about the hush money payments, and now it's just not he knew about it, but it's just not a crime. And a year ago, he wasn't doing any business with Putin or Moscow during the campaign, and now, big deal. That's just what that's. Anybody
Pants
can do
on
that.
Fire.
And they have
that's the legal term.
They have his chief financial guy cooperating from his business, and I mean, I don't think any business would want that. and particularly for Trump, where it seems like, they just cut corners and, they're very play fast and loose. So I think you're exactly right. Even if he would step down as president or leave, I mean, there's all this stuff with his private business.
Yeah.
Well, let's
black eye for the country.
We can come back to some of this because there are many other elements to this whole Washington story. But before we take a break, I go back to where we started with the Greitens case and Wesley Bell. We'll talk about Bell after the break. But what's the most memorable aspect of the whole Greitens story, Bill, that when you think back on it, what comes to mind?
Well, I guess it's just being stunned that a person elected governor could act in, like he's basically 16 years old or something.
Right.
I mean, just amazingly terrible alleged behavior that he was involved in, and then the for a while there they were picking up the Trump playbook of this is all just fake news, and obviously that didn't get him past June.
Jennifer, do you wish you had been circuit attorney during this period of time?
No. But I'm not sure. I and I don't know the insides of all of the allegations, but I know enough. I mean, I think everything has pretty much been made public at this point. But I'm not sure that I would have brought those charges based on the evidence that they had at that point. And obviously, prosecutors have great discretion in what charges they can bring or not bring. And I don't mean to substitute my judgment for Ms. Gardner's, but I'm not sure that I would have proceeded down that path, particularly against a sitting governor with that hand to play.
Was it handled well, do you think? I don't want to put you on the spot, except
well,
I
then
am.
don't.
Well,
Yeah. Well, I'll say, I mean, as an outsider and someone who's never worked, it didn't seem like it was handled well. Bringing in the guy who was obviously lying about stuff when he got questioned on it, the investigator, right?
Tisby.
Yeah, Tisby, right. But my central issue is exactly what Bill said, and it's not a legal issue, but you just want to say, I mean, what is going on? I mean, how does somebody do that? He's married, he's got kids,
Right.
He's got this huge, and it's not like he's a 19-year-old college kid making a stupid choice. I mean, he's a grown man.
But he's not the first one. I
I know.
We can go back
I don't
and take them
understand
off
that
one
either.
after
And
the other.
also, what really, in my opinion, the real reason that he stepped down is because he was going to have to give over his donor list and information to to the legislature and their panel that was investigating him. As these allegations regarding his mistress and everything, remember he hired 8 different lawyers.
Yeah.
It was the dream team. Everybody was, from Ed Dowd to Jack Garvey to Scott Rosenblum. I mean, holy moly. He was really, because I think they saw that they had a shot of getting out from under those charges. But once it became clear that he had to turn over his donor lists and answer questions along those lines, that was when he resigned. Mm-hmm. So he had a lot going on. He was not the guy that we all thought he was, clearly. Right. What fascinates me about him is that if you look at his background, he majored in ethics at Duke. And he, everybody agrees that he wanted to be president. Mm-hmm. He had that website reserved and, that domain name. And so this is a guy who's very calculated as to how he was going to go about in his life. And even to the point where he's majoring in ethics, not, I believe, because he was an ethical person, but because he wanted to facsimilate an ethical person. I mean, I say this, I don't know him well, but it's just fascinating to me that he was able to rise to the levels that he was as quickly as he was and then fall as quickly, too.
I've got to take a break, but didn't I read something in the not-too-distant past that he is supposedly considering getting back into politics? Did anybody see that?
I saw that. That was a tweet by Jeff Smith, and
Maybe the two of them could join.
Yeah, well, and
they're bonding.
Jeff Smith seems to have a very flexible relationship with the truth and seems to really crave publicity. So I don't know that I believe that. But, I mean, this Greitens guy seems to be,
He's not who we thought he was.
And he also doesn't not give up. I mean, the fact that he fought it as long, so maybe he is doing it. Who knows?
Let's take that break now. Come back and talk about some other things. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU. And welcome back to our year-end Legal Roundtable panel discussion, looking back over some of the big legal stories over the past year. I should point out, by the way, that this program was recorded a couple of days ago, so if something big happened in the legal world between then and now, that's why we're not talking about it. With me in studio, Mark Smith, former Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce, and Bill Freivogel. Let's go back to where we started, and Jennifer, again, I'll go back to you, because this is you bring a new element to the story of Wesley Bell's defeat of Robert McCullough. What happened since then, as most people know, I think, is the fact that the prosecutors in that office, we don't know exactly how many of them voted this way, but they voted to join a police union. Mm-hmm. What is your take on that? You've learned something about that.
Right. Well, when y'all invited me to be on this show, I knew that this would be a topic that would come up. So I reached out to some friends of mine in that office and learned that really it's not what people think. The reason why they voted to unionize, and it was the prosecutors and the investigators, was primarily about the dysfunction in the county council and the fact that they are having a budget crisis. They've recently, they made noises that they were going to do it, and then they did, I believe, pass a budget which took $5 million from the police department. You'll recall that they had the Proposition P some time ago, which was supposed to provide raises for prosecutors, among other things. And the person that I spoke to on this has been there for over 10 years and has never had a raise. So these raises were long overdue for the prosecutors. And there was lots of discussion in the county council that they were going to get rid of those. And they realized that they didn't have any way to effectively negotiate that with the council because they weren't unionized.
Well, most people, well, I don't say most people, but there has been an assumption that they're doing this because of Wesley Bell, who is going to reform the office and perhaps fire a lot of people.
Yeah, my understanding is that could not be farther from the truth. First off, Wesley Bell can't fire anybody. They're civil service over there, different than the circuit attorney's office. I could hire and fire at will. The St. Louis County Prosecutor's Office is civil service. So there's only two positions other than the elected prosecutor that Wesley Bell could fire, even if he wanted to, and I've never heard him say that he did. So you've got to understand, these are prosecutors, okay? They're public servants. They're interested in pursuing justice in the courtroom. They're not politically minded. They're not interested in making speeches on the courthouse steps. They just want to do their job, and they want to be paid fairly for it. So they have done really, I believe, a poor job in getting their perspective out on this, which has caused the whole narrative about they're worried about Wesley Bell to take root. But I believe that's a false narrative. I think, and I'm convinced that they are concerned about being fairly paid. They're concerned about being able to hold their own in discussions with a dysfunctional county council. I mean, there was an example that when Mr. McCullough was speaking to the county council recently about his budget, one of the council members asked McCullough how many public defenders worked in his office and how much money was he going to give to the public defenders. So we're laughing because the public defenders, that's a completely different office, and it's state funded, and it has nothing to do with the budget for the St. Louis County prosecutor. But to have one of the, 6 county council members not know that really concerns the rank and file prosecutors and investigators in that office. So I believe most of them voted for McCullough, but in the months that have transpired, they've had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Bell. They've met with the people that are going to be on his transition team, and they are, in very large part, enthusiastic and welcoming a change and are excited to work with him. And they feel bad that this has been misinterpreted, the fact that they joined this union.
Do you have any idea what the vote was?
My understanding, it was 3-1 in favor of joining the union. But again, it was not about concern about Wesley Bell, because if you think about it, what do they gain by doing that? Nothing. They already can't be fired. It does nothing. They really are looking forward to working with them. They're optimistic and open-minded and open-hearted about it.
I think Jennifer has a future as a journalist. She likes the tweet, and you,
I do.
you're protecting your source here, and you've got all
I'm
sorts of
protecting my
inside
source.
information.
Yeah, I'm trying to talk them into making this information public, and maybe by the time this is broadcast, they will, because we've all seen what happens if you don't get both sides out. The narrative that's out becomes the truth in people's mind.
You're not getting bored in retirement, are you?
I really hope that Wesley Bell, I wish him great success. No way did I think he could get elected. I'm afraid I even said so on this show before the election. But I hope he is careful and watches what has happened with Kim Gardner, because I have great hopes. Had great hopes for Kim Gardner. I guess I still do, but she's certainly had a really rough first number of months, and not only the Greitens prosecution, but other things as well. And so I think it's really important that Wesley Bell, take it easy, and I'm not saying he has to do everything like Bob McCullough did, but and he surely shouldn't. But he should also be careful.
Jennifer, I'll ask you this because you would know. Stepping into a job like this, how long does it take? There's got to be a learning curve.
Oh,
coming
my God,
in.
huge.
So
huge learning curve.
You talk about Kim Gardner just parachuting in, and it's a different deal.
The problem is, and I kind of parachuted in too. I can admit it now that when I became circuit attorney, I had zero management experience. I wasn't even married then, so I didn't even get the chance to manage my husband at that point. And
Times have changed, I'm sure.
Now he's the focus of all of my management. Poor man. But I did not know what I was doing. And I was a homicide prosecutor. I had great skills at that. But that is a completely different skill set than being the elected prosecutor in a large office. And the good news for me, though, is that I didn't fire everybody who knew what they were doing. And so I had a vision of what I wanted to accomplish. But I had people there who could tell me, whoa, if you do that, this is what's going to happen. And that saved me from flying the plane into the ground. And if you don't know what you're doing to be the elected prosecutor, that's not optimal, but you can survive that if you have good advisors. And that's one thing that gives me hope about Wesley Bell, is just seeing the people that are advising him. My hope is he seems like he's a very thoughtful and reasonable person. My hope is that he keeps the experienced people close by to him in St. Louis County, and he can learn the job. But there's no way you're going to know what to expect until you're actually in that spot. I remember D. Joyce Hayes. She didn't have a caseload. She was my predecessor. And I thought to myself, heck, I'm going to go to the gym every day and get my nails done, go shopping. This is going to be awesome. She doesn't have a caseload. What does she do? Oh, I never once went to the gym during the day when I was circuit attorney. I didn't have time to go to the gym, So you don't know till you're in that spot. And you got to have good advisors if you don't have the experience.
Well, you might have some disgruntled advisors because apparently they're not going to get that pay raise.
Don't you think also he's... he said during his campaign that he would not enforce the death penalty, didn't he? I'm not making that up, am I? I thought he said that.
I think I've heard that attributed to him.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now he's got the Catholic supply. It's hard to imagine
the murder case in the Catholic
the murder
supply.
case
Yes.
where, and granted that's going to take time and everything, but there are going to be people clamoring for the death penalty on that one, and I'm sure he wasn't thinking about a situation like that when he said no death penalty. So I think you're exactly right about in any job, and I can't even imagine what that job, but trying to figure it out, it takes you 6 months to a year to even know what's going on before you start making decisions. But then also, it's easy as a candidate to say, I'm going to do A, B, and C, and then you get in there and all of a sudden
you
facts
realize,
start presenting,
right.
and it becomes more difficult. I'm going to bring in more African-American prosecutors, and you realize, man, it is tough
Right.
to, I mean, every law firm in town is trying to do that. Everyone's trying to do that, and it's tough.
There's something
about time.
freeing about running for office, having never held the office. You know, you don't have
Yeah,
any
yeah,
limits.
yeah, you can
as
say
to
anything, right,
A
yeah.
chicken in every pie, you know.
What do you make of the Jay Ashcroft and now Nicole Galloway using Josh Hawley as kind of a target for misuse of campaign funds? Is anything likely to come of this? What could come of it? Thoughts?
Well, I mean, if you compare it to what happened to Webster,
Who went to jail?
Who went to jail for at least the thing he actually pled to was using the office copier for
Copying
campaign.
machine, yeah.
Which was, I mean, I think that was sort of a plea bargain
Yeah.
deal. But, I guess bottom line is, I think that this is not going to
Right.
cause. I don't think there will be a major criminal investigation of this. I think it seems as though these political operatives were particularly active in his office before the actual campaign began. So that might be a way in which this can be sort of factually distinguished. It's sort of interesting that Ashcroft is biting.
Yeah.
That
Makes
was
you
my
wonder.
next point. Yeah.
Makes you wonder whether there's
What's going on?
There's some ambition
Yeah.
ambition there.
And wanting to expand it by bringing the state auditor into the process too, just to get a little more ammo for
I mean,
whatever
a
he's
lot
up
of
to.
this seems to be based on this Kansas City Star expose, and I read it, and I think it would be tough. I mean, I think there's an easy way to get out of it, and I agree with Bill. I don't see anything big coming of it. They probably were playing a little fast and loose, more than they should have, but.
I mean, it is clear that the moment, and probably before the moment Hawley was elected to Attorney General, he was on his way to running for the Senate. You know,
Even though he
was saying,
Exactly.
not so.
I'm not going to. So
Right.
now I think every time a politician says, I'm not doing something, just assume they are going to do it.
It's hard not to be cynical.
Yeah, it is. It's very difficult.
Anybody know anything about William Bell, who might be the next Attorney General? William Barr.
Well, he was a pretty well respected Attorney General under, I think it was George Herbert Walker Bush.
Yeah, right.
Actually met him one time. He was representing somebody. He came to the Post-Dispatch editorial board representing a U.S. attorney down who was involved in the Waco deal. But I think he has a pretty good reputation. What's just come out about him is that he had written a memo in June, basically saying that Mueller really shouldn't be pursuing the obstruction of justice portion of his investigation, that there wouldn't be any reason either for the president to have to answer Mueller's questions on that part of the investigation. The reason being, it's not obstruction of justice if the president is exercising his constitutional duties. I read a pretty interesting law professor's article this morning saying that if you applied Barr's thinking to Richard Nixon's attempt to get the CIA to shut down the FBI in Watergate, that too was just exercising his constitutional responsibility of overseeing the CIA and FBI. So I don't buy Barr's legal argument, and I think the fact that he expressed it back in June, I mean, one would think that maybe he would have to recuse himself. In connection with Whitaker, apparently the Justice Department ethics person said he should recuse himself and just decided not to.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think if he recuses himself, Trump's head's going to blow up, though.
Yeah, that's true.
I thought Barr's. I wasn't as troubled with what Bill said, but the memo's a strange memo because it's long, single space. I mean, this is some guy who spent a lot of time. What kind of struck me was it was a lot of, well, assume Mueller's doing this or assume he's doing that, and then mean, and then he writes this big long memo, and we don't. I mean, Mueller's been so tight-lipped, we don't know what he's doing, and so I don't really understand why he did it. Why? I mean, maybe he's just the kind of guy who, when he thinks about something, cranks out a 13-page memo. I mean, I don't do that.
I just don't think.
the opening.
I just don't think that like a president could say to, Manafort or Flynn or any one of these other people who Mueller's talking to, look, you keep your mouth shut and don't implicate me in any way, and I will pardon you, whatever happens to you. Now that would be a corrupt understanding. He would be exercising his constitutional powers to pardon, but he would be doing it as part of a corrupt and criminal agreement. So I just don't buy the argument that Barr makes in that.
You mentioned Flynn. They've really got him twisting in the wind right now, don't they?
Wow, yeah, that was interesting. Has anybody heard of that judge before? The
No.
judge that was.
Not
Only
really. He was go ahead.
referred to as no nonsense. He's a no nonsense. What you
Clearly.
hear a lot.
It was interesting that in conservative circles before that hearing, they were really hoping that he was going to challenge Mueller's whole sort of legitimacy, and instead he comes down on this. He comes down on Flynn, and even goes too far as to say he was a traitor. I mean, that's treason is not right.
But he apologized. For that.
Yeah, he did pull that back, but yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I think he was right in saying that for the national security advisor to be talking to the Russians about, maybe we can do something about these sanctions that relate to you fixing affecting the election. I mean that's pretty bad.
A big deal, yeah.
Got to take another break. Let's do that now. Continue our conversation momentarily. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU. And welcome back as we continue our Legal Roundtable panel discussion with Jennifer Joyce, Bill Freivogel, and Mark Smith. Another big story that is of recent vintage concerns Obamacare. I wonder if any of you think that Obamacare is now as good as dead now that a federal judge has ruled against it. Any thoughts?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that the Trump administration has done a lot of things, and also the Republican Congress to hurt it. Yeah, I mean, not having advertising to sign up and getting rid of the mandate. I think the judge, the judge in Texas is a judge who Republican attorney generals go to get favorable rulings. I think the ruling was way too broad. I mean, even if it's true, I mean, it is true that the mandate, the Affordable Care Act was upheld on the basis that the mandate was a tax, and that's what Roberts used as the basis of the ruling to uphold Obamacare. And the Republican Congress this past year made it not a tax, so that kind of constitutional underpinning is gone for the mandate. But I think a lot of conservative as well as liberal commentators have said there was no reason for the judge to then knock out everything in Obamacare. Basically throw out almost the entire law or the entire law, and do it as part of one of these national injunctions. So I don't know, but no, I think it'll be appealed. I think Obamacare will remain. The Affordable Care Act will remain in place during the future legal proceedings, and
but what if it goes to the Supreme Court? And it could.
Well, it doesn't have any fewer votes. The same 5 justices are on the Supreme Court. Kennedy was on the other side. So I think
So it would be Roberts again. Roberts
It would be Roberts again with the Liberals.
Yeah.
Of course, we learned, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was in the hospital today and had two
Cancerous
tumors removed from her lung. And she's home resting. They don't see any other cancer. We'll see where that goes. She's 85.
Let me just point out once again that this is a recorded program, and the day that it was recorded was the day we learned about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. By the time this airs, hopefully we'll have much more information.
But I mean, when you hear about it, I think about, my mother turns 85 tomorrow, and if she has some health issue, she's not going to snap right back. And my aunt and uncle, a little in their later 80s, a fall takes them out for a month. I mean, and we're expecting, we see that stuff with her working out, and like she's Iron Man, she's not. She's 85 years old, and I really worry about that. Going back to what you said about this Texas case and the what are some of the big legal stories? I mean, one of the big legal stories is the tax cut that happened. I mean, we don't talk about it a lot, but it has huge ramifications beyond just what the taxes you pay at the end of the month or the end of the year. This Affordable Care Act could be impacted, but also, the deficit it's going to affect, and how do we deal with that in the future? And it's going to be really tough to undo that and go back to say, okay, we're going to raise up taxes here. Nobody wants to do that. So I think it's not going to happen right now, but it'll have a big impact, I think, on our country.
We had a tax guy on the program last week, and wait till you see the forms this year.
Really?
They're quite a bit different than what we're used to, and going to be a little bit more difficult to navigate. On the subject of money, Jennifer, I'll come back to you on this one. Apparently, a significant grant has been awarded to the Circuit Attorney's Office for something called conviction integrity, a conviction integrity unit in the city.
Right.
Haven't we had conviction integrity all along?
Well, conviction integrity is kind of a concept that sprung up. I think it was originally created in Dallas, and then the Brooklyn DA took the ball and ran with it too. And it's really caught on around the country. We had a conviction integrity unit when I was the circuit attorney, and I think what is going to happen now is that's going to be expanded with some federal funding. And basically what a conviction integrity unit is you always get calls and letters and things like that saying, hey, my brother was convicted and he was innocent, and what do you do with those and how do you handle those? And what a conviction integrity unit is a special unit that just handles those cases and goes in and investigates them. We reinvestigated probably 1,400 cases in my office that were convicted and individuals imprisoned before I became circuit attorney. A lot of the cases that you hear about convictions being overturned were from the 80s and 90s, where the forensic science wasn't very good. And things are so much better now, but there still remains a lot of cases where they bear review. And so I think it's terrific that they've gotten this grant, and some offices around the country are bringing in like defense attorneys to serve on their conviction integrity unit, and people from outside the prosecutor's office, which is good too. As much as we try not to, we can get tunnel vision as prosecutors. We are, the worst thing I think that can happen to anybody is to be in an echo chamber and to only hear voices and viewpoints that agree with you. And if your head is down and you're working on these cases and all you hear is the victims and the police, you kind of need that external voice to come in and tell you, share a different perspective.
And this grant will allow her to bring in an attorney to do this, right?
I believe so, yeah.
I thought that's what I saw. Maybe a staff member, too.
That's what she would do. And she's partnering with the Innocence Project,
right,
too.
Exactly.
Right. I think part of this money pays for part of the salary of an Innocence Project investigator to be working on this effort.
I think it's terrific. We try our best in the criminal justice system, but nobody's perfect. It's a system of human beings. And so the more that we can review and have other perspectives look at the work that we do, the better.
And now we're talking criminal justice reform. It looks like President Trump is going to be signing this major legislation. President Trump has been given a lot of credit for kind of supporting this thing. Any feeling amongst you folks about that and what it's likely to mean?
Well, I think it's a big deal. I think it's a terrific accomplishment. I guess it's one of those criminal justice issues on which you can get libertarian conservatives and sort of civil libertarians to agree.
You have both the ACLU and the Koch brothers.
Exactly.
Together
They're
on this one.
palsy-walsy.
They're
all
always
the time
hanging
now.
out, right? Yeah.
But the Koch brothers were really big backers of this,
And Kim Kardashian.
I was not aware of that,
Yeah, I
Jennifer.
missed that too.
Name dropper.
Chairman Grassley of the Senate Judiciary Committee was a big proponent of this. Helped to make it happen. So yes, I think it's going. It gives judges more discretion in sentencing, so that they aren't entirely tied to those little boxes of the sentencing guidelines.
Jennifer, what's it likely to mean in the city of St. Louis, in a city like St. Louis?
What's it going to mean? Not much.
Yeah.
It only affects the federal prosecutors, and they only prosecute a tiny percentage of the criminal prosecutions in the United States. So, I mean, I get...
And it's only a very small part of our prison population, too.
Right. And I get what you're saying, Bill, that it's a big deal, but I got to say, I don't think it's a very big deal for that reason. The impact of it is very limited, and the reforms are pretty small compared to the opportunity that's out there to really take a look at our justice system.
Maybe a first step? I mean, because we've had this whole, 3 strikes and you're out, and it was mandatory, and everything was going in this direction, and now you don't think it could be the start?
Well, I think there's initiatives all over the place looking at our justice system, but what we have is we had a very high crime period in the 80s and 90s, and so all of these draconian laws and sentencing statutes and stuff were passed. Now crime is down. Okay, some people say it's because of the draconian laws, but now crime is down, so we're removing a lot of those, and it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. But I think the real reform, or evolution as I prefer to call it, should be in the state system, because that is the system that touches most people's lives. That's where we need more diversion. We need more mental health courts. We need to end cash bail, things of that nature. These changes in the federal system are going to affect a small number of people, and I'd like to see us do more.
I wanted to get to another subject, too, regarding the Supreme Court. Bill, you brought to our attention earlier last week what seems to be perhaps a budding alliance between the most recent Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. What's going on there? What do you think is happening on the basis of what we've been reading?
Yeah, well, so I was. This was well explained by Linda Greenhouse's, the former New York Times Supreme Court reporter, who was pointing to a case where the Supreme Court refused to hear an appeal involving Planned Parenthood. This was an appeal of states that wanted to be able to cut off funding for Planned Parenthood. The basis of that was, those very misleading videos from a few years ago about Planned Parenthood supposedly selling fetus body parts. And so a number of states attempted to cut off funding, Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood. And the question that was before the Supreme Court was, can Medicaid recipients challenge that kind of a state decision? And 4 Circuit Court of Appeals courts had ruled that yes, a Medicaid recipient can challenge cutting off Planned Parenthood, and therefore Planned Parenthood would most likely be able to continue receiving funding. One Court of Appeals said no Medicaid recipient could challenge it. That's actually our St. Louis 8th Circuit Court of Appeals here in St. Louis that was the outlier. And so then the court refused to hear an appeal. Justice Thomas took the fairly unusual step of explaining why he thought they should have taken the appeal, and he was joined by Alito and Gorsuch. That left Kavanaugh out of that group of three.
And it was pretty snarky.
It was a pretty,
dissent.
yeah. And he said, look, the Supreme Court almost always takes important cases where there's a split among courts of appeals, and the only reason we're not doing it is because Planned Parenthood is a sort of golden boy. He didn't use golden,
but it's political.
But it was political,
yeah.
And but so what's interesting is it seems as though Kavanaugh was with the Chief Justice there, and so what Linda was reading into that, and I think she's got a good point. Although it'll take months and years to see whether this plays out, is that Kavanaugh could be an ally of the Chief Justices for putting the legitimacy of the court as the most important thing, rather than trying to overturn Roe versus Wade or other kinds of more liberal precedents. And we'll see how that plays out.
And that's very important to Roberts, the reputation of the court and the
yes,
image of the
I mean,
court.
He's been Chief Justice for 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, and he's a young man. He's going to be Chief Justice, if his health holds out another 20 years. And this is the most important thing to Roberts is the legitimacy of his.
But in terms of Kavanaugh, I mean, when you're playing poker, I don't judge what kind of player you are based on the way you play two hands. I mean, that's too little information, and we've got too little information here. And he's new, and he's going to be overly, I think, cautious. And so, I mean, it could be that we've got this now. We're going to have this 3-2-4 grouping, but I just think it's too soon to tell anything.
Okay, move on to another thing. Coming back to local, and again, Jennifer, I'll turn to you with regard to the police officers who are being excluded from bringing cases to Kim Gardner's office. What do you make of that? Judge now has gotten into the act, and he wants some information about this. What's to be told?
I think it's always a tough situation as prosecutor. You have information on police officers conducting themselves in a way. Remember that prosecutors vouch for the credibility of every witness they put on the stand. And we had occasions when I was circuit attorney where we would lose confidence in the credibility of an officer for one reason or another. And it may be a reason that I was able to talk about, and it may not be a reason that I was able to talk about. I mean, we had the recent indictments of the in the federal court of the officers during the Stockley protests. There's no doubt that Kim Gardner knew about that and did not want to put officers on the stand that she knew were going to be indicted momentarily. But wasn't in a position to say anything about it. So it's frustrating because you want to be able to tell people why you do what you do, but lots of times you can. And you don't want to put someone on the stand and vouch for their credibility when you don't have confidence in their credibility. So every prosecutor handles that differently, but it's a problem that many prosecutors have to face.
What does the judge want to know? Why specifically these 28 officers are being excluded?
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly he wants to know.
That's Seltzer, right?
Seltzer, yeah. I know there's a recent ruling, and I know that there was concern about that the police union did not want to have these names released. I think he was saying that the police officers needed to be given some kind of notice about what the reason was, so it wasn't you couldn't not tell them why they were being excluded. Well, this is all in light of a recent Missouri Supreme Court unanimous decision, which says that the right of a prosecutor to charge a case, not charge a case, put on witnesses, what have you, is completely unfettered, and she has absolute discretion in that. So I don't know how she can be forced to use a witness that she doesn't want to use, or explain her choice in not using that witness.
My understanding is that a lot of attorneys in town know the names on that list, that is being passed around.
Well, I know that when I was in office, there was always courthouse rumors about this cop and that cop, and many of those courthouse rumors ended up to being true.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me that there is a lot of discussion about what police officers are on this list.
Yeah.
And Judge Stelzer was he was the lawyer for the police department, the police
Yes.
board when he
He's
was in the
very
city council.
pro-police.
But he's also going to be thoughtful and knowledgeable about
Yes.
what's going on.
He's
We're
a
gonna
St.
have-
Joan of Arc guy, actually.
Is he really?
We're going to have to leave it with Joan of Arc,
Okay,
St.
okay.
Joan of Arc. Our time is up. I want to thank you all so much for being with us. Hope you're having wonderful holidays. Bill Freibold, you and your family. Jennifer, nice
Thank
to
you.
see you again. I hope you're having a good season. Mark Smith, same to you.
Thank you.
You so much for being with us. Happy New Year to you all.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.